So I wanted to make at least one video in the month of October about a horror film I enjoy, and although I have mentioned in a previous video how much I love Robert Eggers' The Witch, I've yet to dedicate an entire video to it. Several channels have made The Witch Explained videos in the last couple of years since it came out, so I suppose this analysis is a bit late, but I really love this film and I hope some people who haven't seen it yet will discover it this month when searching for horror films to watch for Halloween. On that note, I should confirm this video is going to spoil the entire movie, so if you didn't gather that from the title, you have officially been warned. The Witch is on Netflix right now, and by right now I mean whenever it is I'm uploading this, so if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it real quick. It's only like an hour and a half. And for those of you that have seen the film and are looking to gain a better understanding of it, I hope that I'm able to help you out. Let's get into it. The Witch begins with a family of 6 being exiled from their village due to the father's very public disagreements with its church. They set out into the wilderness to find a place where they can build a home and quickly find a suitable area to settle into. Some months later, they have a house, a small farm, and a new baby in the family. The oldest child, Thomason, takes the baby, who's called Samuel, out by the woods to play with him, and mid-peekaboo, he is gone. And since this film plays no games, the next scene is of poor Samuel being ritualistically killed by this witch who uses his blood and fat to give herself the ability to fly, and presumably increase her HP overall. Meanwhile, back at the farm, everyone is devastated by Samuel's disappearance. Well, almost everyone. God. Approximately a week after the baby vanishes, the oldest son Caleb and the father William set off early in the morning to hunt, and while the two are discussing their religion, Caleb straight up asks if his baby brother is in hell since he hadn't been baptized. This is a pretty valid question considering this is what this kid has been taught his entire life, but his dad just kind of gives him the long-winded Old English version of "I don't know," and confesses that he traded his wife's prized possession, a silver cup, for hunting supplies. Also, we find out that he is shit at hunting. When the two of them get back to the farm, William's wife Catherine is upset about William taking one of their children into the woods so soon after they just lost their baby, and she's also upset with Thomason for just existing. Caleb then lies and says that they didn't want to tell her where they were going because they wanted to try to find some apples for her to cheer her up. This succeeds in softening her anger, so William doesn't scold him for lying even though they just had a long discussion about sin. Oh, and also, Black Phillip. While Thomason and Caleb are down by the river washing their father's clothes, Mercy comes and starts playing around pretending she's a witch. When Thomason scolds her for goofing off, Mercy says that Black Phillip told her she can do whatever she wants. She also says that she believes Thomason let a witch take Samuel because she's seen one running around in the woods. Thomason gets fed up with Mercy being a little shit and decides to scare her by pretending that she's a witch. At dinner, Catherine brings up that her silver cup is missing and immediately insinuates that Thomason is responsible. William kinda defends Thomason, but neglects to bring up the fact that he literally traded the cup away, basically letting his daughter take the heat for his dishonesty. And also, I hope you're catching on to whose fault I think all of this is. Anyway, the goats start freaking out outside, and when Thomason goes to check on them, she sees a brown rabbit. The same one that William failed miserably at shooting earlier. That night, William tries to comfort Catherine by telling her how fortunate they've been that God hasn't taken a child from them until now, which I guess is kind of reasonable since during that time it was extremely common for families to lose several children since it was pretty easy to just get sick and die from anything. Catherine responds by saying she believes the family is cursed and says they never should have left the plantation, which makes William kind of angry since he believes himself to be way too punk rock for that church. We then find out that not only does William suck at hunting, but he also sucks at farming, and their corn isn't even good enough to trade with anyone. So since Thomason is old enough to be considered a woman, they talk about giving her away to another family since they don't have the resources to provide for her anymore. The next morning, Caleb decides to go check the traps in the hopes that if they have enough food, then his sister won't have to be given away. Thomason goes with him, and after they check the traps, they run into that rabbit again, and both the dog and the horse freak out. Caleb takes off after the dog and leaves Thomason to get thrown off their horse and knocked unconscious. When she wakes up, she's able to make her way home while poor Caleb finds their dog dead and gets attacked by the witch, who's a hot lady now, presumably from all the baby eating she's been doing. While Catherine is grilling Thomason about why her and Caleb were in the woods, William finally admits that he traded her silver cup away and confesses that the real reason he took Caleb in the woods the other day was to go hunting. They get into a huge fight, and when things finally calm down, Thomasin, desperate to make her mother happy, offers to bed down the goats for the night. And while she's doing that, Caleb shows back up and he is not okay. Sometime later, the twins tell Thomasin that Black Phillip told them that she's the one who's making Caleb sick. Also, there's blood in the female goat's milk now, and everything is just pretty much going to shit. So much so that William finally says they can go back to the plantation so they can get Caleb some medical attention, which he seems to think they'll be able to do with no horse, but anyway, as the family is preparing for the trip, they hear Caleb screaming inside the house, and when the family finally rushes to his side, it soon becomes apparent that his affliction is a demonic one. The twins, being their usual awful selves, use this as an opportunity to completely throw their sister under the bus and tell their parents that she's a witch and responsible for everything that's been going wrong, including bewitching Caleb. They further try to sell this by faking being afflicted themselves, and as Caleb succumbs to his affliction and dies, it seems that both Catherine and William believe that Thomasin is responsible. After following her outside, William makes it very clear that he suspects her and asks her to speak truth to him, and does she ever? Completely devastated at the accusation, Thomasin calls her dad out on all of his bullshit and tells him that she believes the twins to be responsible for everything. William drags Thomasin inside, finds out the twins have been faking this whole time, and decides to lock up Thomasin and the twins and the goats until he figures out what to do. While Thomasin listens to her father finally confess his wrongdoing, Catherine is awoken by a vision of Sam and Caleb having been returned to her. The twins find out that unfortunately the witch has gotten into the barn with them, and we're shown that Catherine is not breastfeeding Sam, but letting herself be fed upon by a raven. Yikes. Getting up the next morning, William finds the barn completely destroyed with only Thomasin left alive. Oh, and Black Phillip, of course, who kills William by impaling him and causing him to be buried alive under all of his firewood. Upon finding that Thomasin is the only family member left alive, Catherine is convinced she's responsible for everything and attacks her, forcing Thomasin to kill her own mother in self-defense. In shock, Thomasin removes her dress and sits alone until nightfall, at which point she follows Black Phillip back to the barn and begs him to speak to her as he did the twins. He finally answers her in a deep whisper, and it turns out that Black Phillip is your boy, Satan. Or some other demon, it doesn't really say. Thomasin gives in to temptation, signs her name in his book, and follows him out into the woods to find that she has a new family now. So some of you may have clicked on this video because you understand the film for the most part, but are having trouble grasping its point. Why tell a story like this? A story that essentially portrays the horrific demise of an entire family? Well, first of all, the writer and director Robert Eggers grew up in New England and says he remembers witches being a part of his earliest nightmares. Passionate about New England's history, Eggers went to great lengths to make this film's aesthetic and dialogue as accurate as possible. Almost everything Caleb says during his possession scene was taken directly from accounts of child possession by Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister who had an interest in writing down accounts of witchcraft in the late 1600s. People really believed in this stuff at that time and lived in fear of it constantly, which you're probably aware of if you know anything about the Salem witch trials. If you happen to have this film on DVD, I highly recommend watching it with the director's commentary, because Eggers goes into great detail about what the film was and wasn't able to do accurately to the time period. It's fascinating to listen to and provides a lot of insight into the challenges that filmmakers are faced with when trying to accurately put together a period piece. But back to the story itself. On the surface, it seems that we're just watching this family be victimized by an evil they have no control over. After a witch steals the youngest member of the family, the demonic energy that's living amongst them slowly turns the remaining members of the family against one another, causing them to spiral towards complete damnation. Or is it perhaps the wickedness that already lies within the hearts of certain family members, such as William's pride, Catherine's anger and jealousy, and the twins just being complete little shits in general, that's feeding the evil and allowing it to have power over them? I happen to think it's both, and that William's poor decision-making is damning his family just as much as its supernatural oppressors. As far as the Witch of the Wood and Black Phillip are concerned, their agenda for how they want to use this family is pretty straightforward. According to old witchcraft lore, young children are essentially food and spell ingredients. It was believed that witches would steal unbaptized babies and use them to make ointments that would give them the power of flight, and that they would also burn children's bodies as a sacrifice. Since the twins, Jonas and Mercy, are already wicked in nature, the demon chooses to speak to them in secret, telling them things to further turn them against their siblings, which escalates to the point that they eventually fake being possessed in order to frame their own sister as a witch. And after serving their purpose of further driving the family apart, they're attacked by the Witch of the Wood and disposed of. Black Phillip's main goal seems to be creating a set of circumstances that would push the 2 adult women in the family to sign his book, sell their souls, and become witches. It may seem upon first watch that he was only interested in recruiting Thomasin the whole time, but he's after Catherine too. During Catherine's vision of her 2 dead children, Caleb mentions that there's a book she needs to look at, but she becomes distracted by the vision of her baby, and Thomasin kills her in self-defense before Black Phillip has another opportunity to try tempting her again. As far as the 2 oldest males in the family, they're just kind of in the way, which is why William is just sort of unceremoniously killed by Black Phillip towards the end. Though there were men who were accused of being witches and killed during the Salem witch trials, accusations of witchcraft were primarily directed towards women, and in the context of this film, if the No Boys Allowed dance party at the end was any indication, it seems like Black Phillip only lets ladies sign his book. Caleb is possibly a little bit too old for his body parts to be used in any spells, but he can still be used as a tool to further break down the family's bond. So the Witch of the Wood attacks him, he becomes possessed, and finds his way home. It appears that you can only sign Satan's yearbook out of your own free will, so to ensure that the women in the family would be emotionally broken enough to make that decision, Caleb is allowed to make his way home so he can die horribly in front of everyone, causing further trauma. Oh, and as far as whether or not Caleb's soul is saved at the time of his death, I don't know. I think it was meant to be left ambiguous because it leaves the audience feeling far more uneasy not knowing what happened to him. Catherine seems to think that his last words were just a demon speaking scripture, but I don't know, I hope his soul was saved. He was a good kid, it's not his fault his dad was a big dummy. And speaking of William, we finally arrived at the entire reason I made this video. When we were first introduced to this family, they're standing alongside William as he is on trial for publicly speaking out against the beliefs of the church. It's never specifically stated what he's been saying, only that William believes it to be Christ's true gospel, and it has deeply offended his community. At first, you sort of admire William for standing up to the man and following his own beliefs in such a public manner, since we all sort of wish we had the courage to stand up for what we believe to be right. But as the film goes on, it becomes clear that William did not think any of this through and puts his own disagreements with the church over the well-being of his family. And as we find out later in the film, William does not have any of the skills necessary to live outside of a community. He can't hunt, he sucks at farming, and his only real skill is chopping firewood, so at least he can keep his family warm as they starve to death. He returns to this particular chore over and over throughout the film, each time he's overcome with guilt or shame and is trying to repress it, until finally he's buried under the weight of his sins as he dies. When Caleb asks William about whether or not his little brother is in hell because he died before he was baptized, William isn't able to give him a straight answer, saying that only God knows where Samuel is now. This is quite different from his attitude during the trial, in which his beliefs seem so black and white that he's willing to risk his family's lives over them. William isn't a bad man, he's just plagued by so much pride that it blinds him. If you remove the supernatural element from this entirely, he still made a horrible decision for the future of his children and isolating them from everything. The entire reason Caleb is looking down his sister's corset all the time is that there are literally no other girls around his age and he's getting confused. And the twins are growing up like little brats because Catherine and William are so busy trying not to die that they just don't have time to discipline them in the same way they did with their older children. I mean, when you have to tie your kids to a fence so they don't run away, it's just over. You're done. Now, Catherine does hold some responsibility for the breakdown of this family in the sense that she directs so much of her anger towards Thomasin, who's done nothing to deserve it. It's really sad when you hear Thomasin reminisce about their life in England, because it sounds like the family used to be so much happier in general, to where the dad would even crack jokes once in a while. So you don't know if Catherine has always treated Thomasin this way, or if it's just harbored resentment from the fact that Thomasin was with Samuel when he was taken, making Thomasin responsible for it in Catherine's eyes. Her anger towards William, however, is pretty justified, considering the death of his youngest child isn't even enough to convince him to take the family back to the plantation where they'll be safe. During their conversation in bed, she says they never should have left the plantation, which William becomes very defensive over. This is pretty hypocritical, considering the conversation begins with William telling her that she's dwelling on Samuel's death too much and that she should just basically count her blessings, when the whole reason that they're in danger in the first place is because William was so focused on his disagreements with the church that he put his family in this awful situation. There's an old joke. A joke that I think most of you have heard before, that I feel sums up William's internal struggle and the cautionary tale that this film presents. It goes something like this. A man is stuck on a rooftop during a flood, so he begins praying for God to save him. Just then, a rowboat comes by and the person inside says, "Jump in, I can save you." The man on the roof replies, "No thank you, God will save me," and the rowboat moves on. Then a motorboat comes by. The person inside the motorboat says, "Jump in, I can save you." But again, the man on the roof replies, "No thank you, God is going to save me." So the motorboat moves on. Then a helicopter arrives, letting down a rope as the pilot yells, "Grab on, I can save you." But once again, the man on the roof refuses and tells the pilot that God will save him, and the helicopter flies away. Eventually, the man drowns, and when he meets God in the afterlife, he asks him, "Why did you let me drown? I prayed for you to save me, but you let me die. Why would you let this happen?" And God replies, "My dude, I sent you a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter. What did you expect?" Like I said before, William is not a bad man. He really does love his wife and children, but his pride blinds him from seeing what's best for them. He won't even consider going back to the plantation until he's about to lose another child, and by then it's too late because the family's horse is gone. And before that, he's even willing to give his oldest daughter away to another family before even entertaining the idea of going back. His baby dies, his family's starving, he fails at almost everything he tries to do, and he doesn't even consider that this might be God trying to say, "Bro, look, you are not built for this. I know you don't like that church, and I totally get that, but it's literally the only town that exists right now, so you're gonna have to compromise a little bit so more of your babies don't die. There's literally demons out here. I don't know how much more in your face I could be about this. Please leave." But unfortunately, William isn't able to face what he's done until his family has completely fallen apart to the point of no return, and the evil that oppresses them is in total control. So yeah, that's my personal take on The Witch. I hope that my unhealthy obsession with this film has been put to good use and was able to help some of you gain a better understanding of it overall. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!